Let's go! Vanderbilt, what do we expect from the game? I'm going to give you a final score. I'm going to give you, hopefully, a pick that can maybe make you money. And, of course, we're going to highlight 3 Tigers in particular to look out for. So, go on ahead, hit that subscribe button. It's a road to 1K. Let's go! So, my first key to the game, how will LSU line up at receiver? So, last year, LSU kept a pretty tight rotation at wide receiver. Thaddeus Moss was the tight end. Terrace Marshall Jr., Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson were the receivers. And they also kept a tight rotation at running back. In the first game against Mississippi State, where there was discombobulation and obviously hesitation from Myles Brennan throwing the football, LSU rotated a lot of receivers in and out. There were 2 receivers that obviously played better than the rest. Despite his 2 drops, Terrace Marshall Jr., of course, has to be out there. And to a surprise to many of us, Jaray Jenkins was probably LSU's best overall and consistent receiver in the game. And then you have Racey McMath at the other receiver spot. At tight end, you got to start Eric Gilbert. He showed you enough promise, but hopefully LSU got after Gilbert this week because he was a huge liability as a blocker. Not only in inline pass protection, but on a huge screen pass earlier in the game. They got Trey Palmer the football, and Eric Gilbert missed his block. Then obviously at running back, is LSU going to rotate at running back? Rotate. Is LSU going to rotate, or is it rotate? LSU's going to rotate running backs probably again, but my counter to that is, how do you know if a running back has a hot hand when you're taking that running back out every other series? Will Myles Brennan improve? Obviously, that goes along with this point number 1. I hope. And number 2 thing, defensively, Derek Stingley Jr., how healthy is he? This is interesting because especially in this pandemic, road trips, while it is not as difficult to play with no fans in the stands, you still have to travel. Now, if you get a healthy Derek Stingley Jr., you still got to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your defensive backfield. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on Bo Pelini because we've done 2 videos on him this week, but same thing on the offensive side of the ball. What about LSU's personnel in the secondary? So, Stingley starts. Who's your opposite corner going to be? You know, conventional logic, based on last week's performance, you would have to guess Eli Ricks gets his start. So if that's the case, is it Cordell Flott in the slot? What is Jay Ward's health? What do you do? Who is that other safety going to be alongside Jacoby Stevens? Is it Todd Harris, who obviously had a horrible missed tackle last week? Or is it Mo Hampton? I'm super high on Mo Hampton. I think he's going to be a superstar, but, you know, it wasn't his best game either against Mississippi State. And number 3. This is where I really worry about LSU. Pass protection. Now, the offensive line is going to play better. And I know I haven't mentioned Ken Seals yet from Vanderbilt, their true freshman quarterback, who threw 2 interceptions last week against Texas A&M, but on the flip side of that, threw the best ball in all the SEC last week for a touchdown. The kid has some talent, but where Vanderbilt is really strong, and it was a surprise to everyone, their defensive line. Out of every defensive line that played last week in college football, Vanderbilt had the number 1 ranked defensive line according to Pro Football Focus. Can they step up this game against a Vanderbilt front that is nasty, not only at defensive line, but at the second level at linebacker? So, before we get to my prediction, I'm going to give you 3 LSU Tigers to keep an eye on. Number 1, Cam Wire. Now, I know that's not a very familiar name, but Ed Orgeron said earlier this week that Dare Rosenthal A left tackle who really struggled last week will not be available on Saturday. Well, he said it's very likely he won't be available. So you insert Cam Wire at left tackle. Or will they play Marcus Dummerville, the true freshman? Well, who is Cam Wire? Well, he was a 3-star prospect. I love me a good Louisiana 3-star. From Gonzales. Yeah, the home of the famous outlet mall, Gonzales, Louisiana. This is kind of a rough spot. Now, this goes without saying, but I'll say it. Playing left tackle for Myles Brennan is far more important than playing left tackle for Joe Burrow, or pretty much any quarterback you can think of. Myles Brennan had some pocket awareness issues last week. That is Myles Brennan's blind side. One thing he really struggled with, and Ed Orgeron mentioned this, he's got to be able to step up in the pocket. He's got to be able to feel out the rush. So Cam Wire's going to have to be dominant against this Vanderbilt defensive line that looked pretty good. My number 2 Tiger is Ali Gay. I mean, it's kind of wild to say that in that historically bad LSU defensive performance last week, that Ali Gay was historically good. So per Pro Football Focus and my friend Cody Worsham, Ali Gay had 20 positive grade plays against Mississippi State. That is more than Kyle Trask and KJ Costello, who both were incredible in week 1. That's how dominant Ali Gay was. It wasn't just rushing the passer. It was his ability to hold the edge against the run. And then not only did he get good pass rush, he was also able to bat a few balls down. Silently, B.J. Ojulari also had a good game. Had a pretty high grade for a true freshman. So can LSU get those 2 guys to step up like they did last week against Mississippi State? Now, a third Tiger, there's a lot of different names I'm looking out for. Jabril Cox, Damone Clark, Eric Gilbert. Can he get another touchdown? But I want this final Tiger to be the head man himself, Ed Orgeron. Now, I know college football is a weird thing to evaluate, and I am not a national championship level head coach, but Orgeron made a few sloppy mistakes in the critical moments of last week's game. Don't call defensive timeouts in a close game in the second half. Those timeouts are self-explanatory. They're timeouts. You should only use them to stop time late in the game when LSU needed to stop the clock to allow themselves more opportunity to win the game. Last week, after Mississippi State took back the football, the score is 34-34. After one big Mississippi State play, LSU burned a timeout. And then later, before the final Mississippi State touchdown, they burned another timeout on the defensive side of the ball when they weren't even trying to stop clock. So that was 2 burned timeouts. And then also at the end of the game, this is a rare circumstance, but the same thing happened to the Saints against Sunday Night Football. The only difference is that the Saints actually did the right thing. They were down by 10, needing 2 scores in the final minute or so of the game. So obviously you need to not only score but get an onside kick. So if you're down by 10, the smart thing to do is get in field goal range, kick the field goal, and then go get the onside kick. Or if you are to throw the football, make sure you're throwing the football into the end zone. Any short check down in that situation just keeps the clock running when you need 2 scores. I mean, anyone could see this. I mean, that's simple math. You don't do that. You obviously kick the field goal, then you try and get the onside kick. If you get the onside kick, then of course you go score a touchdown. Now, I know the mathematical probabilities of any of that happening are very little, but you guys saw the Cowboys versus the Falcons, right? You got to at least get yourself in that onside opportunity to go win the game. And trust me, I love Ed Orgeron as much as anyone. This isn't a criticism. This is just me wanting the best out of the program. You guys might disagree with me with my logic there. So obviously let me know in the comment section. What is the final score going to be? What should I do betting-wise? Number one, you should never bet on LSU unless your heart can handle it. Your money and your heart and soul into every game, that's tough. But I'm not going to lie. I actually played LSU versus Mississippi State last week, but I didn't play the spread. I decided to pick the under. Little did I know that Derek Stingley Jr. the next morning would be considered out. Obviously, not having Derek Stingley Jr. changed everything for LSU defensively. Heck, maybe nothing was stopping Mississippi State that day. Maybe the over was going to hit regardless. But the truth is that I never, ever make that play knowing Derek Stingley Jr. would not be available for the next day. It's just something I wouldn't have done. So, with that said, man, I say wait until the last second to place your bets. We're living in weird times right now. You don't know who's going to be sick or whatsoever, especially considering LSU opened up around 17, 18-point favorites. It's now up to 20.5. Now, I know a lot of you think Texas A&M is way overrated. They obviously had a lot of defensive backs opt out. Probably my favorite play of the weekend is Bama covering against Texas A&M this weekend. So if you were to play a game, I know it sucks, but heck, it's your money. I would take Bama against the number against Texas A&M. Anyway, we're focusing on this game. I would not bet LSU at 20.5, especially if it gets up to 21. 20.5 is a lot, and I mean a lot of points, especially considering your left tackle will be starting his first game. So, what about the over-under? Are you going to dive back into the under? Heck yes! I'm diving back into the under at 50.5. Take the under. Now, if you're betting the LSU to cover the spread and the under, I would not place that parlay. Obviously, mathematically, that would be very difficult to do. Shout out to Warhug, who says he's watching from the fire department. Shout out to our firefighters. He said he even got a fan. He got a fellow firefighter to start watching too. Hey, I appreciate you guys. Why not? How about this from Zane? Auburn versus Georgia. How about that? That will be kicking off at the same time as LSU versus Vanderbilt. I kind of want to parlay Auburn outright and the over. Can I do that? I don't know. Anyway, I like Auburn to win that football game. I think Auburn has a really good team this year. Yeah, they lost Derek Brown, but, Bo Nix is only going to get better. My only gripe with them is why in the heck would you hire Chad Morris after he was the worst coach we've ever seen in the SEC? Anyway, that should be a fun game. I'm not going to be flipping back and forth, though. I got to figure out my TV situation. It's power. Hour. LSU. Boom. I'm kind of in the mood for some spinach artichoke dip. I know what I'm talking about?